Welcome everybody. Good evening from Germany, Karlsruhe. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend our webinar today. My name is Kai Birval. I'm Director of Support and Training here at Enscape. All right. Welcome to our webinar today. As you see here already on Enscape for SketchUp. We will, in the next hour, we will be talking about, well, what is like a general introduction to Enscape. What is Enscape about? Some navigation, some tips and tricks on navigation, a little bit how to get started with SketchUp or with Enscape for SketchUp, how SketchUp communicates with Enscape, and then maybe some materials and some exports, how to create a video, how to create proper exports. And we will have a Q&A towards the end, like the last 15 minutes. Maybe we'll even start earlier with that Q&A. My experience shows that the questions will start coming at least somewhat during the 30 minutes area. However, if you have questions at any point, if I'm speaking too fast, if I'm not easily understandable, something like that, feel free to post that as a question. You should see a question field somewhere in the GoToWebinar interface, and usually I'll be happy to answer right away. So whenever there's a question, whenever there is something that seems unclear, feel free to share it, and I'll be happy to assist right away. Yeah, and you cannot speak with me at the moment, of course. If you want that, you can raise your hand. There is a hand symbol you should see somewhere. But again, you're simply welcome to post any questions, and I'll be happy to answer right away. This webinar is being recorded, so you don't have to take notes if you don't want to. You all will receive an email sometime tomorrow containing the link to watch this webinar's recording. So feel free. Thank you, Jerry. So feel free to rewatch it then, or just focus on the webinar, or work alongside it if you want to in with Enscape with SketchUp. If you're new to this webinar, hopefully you will learn a lot. If you're already well, a seasoned veteran with Enscape, feel free to ask any questions, and I'd be happy to dive deeper into the topic, because I think usually everybody learns something whenever going into the more detailed topics. Angelica just wrote that she can't hear me well. All right. So yeah, what is Enscape? What is Enscape about? Visualization for architects, for artists, has for a long time been quite some struggle, because architects, of course, want to give their future clients a perfect idea of what they are planning for them, and professional software, professional data usually is not really the best presentation tool to convey a future home, for example, or to convey a design. So architects have been building maquettes, have been drawing, and that has been very, very time consuming and very expensive because of that for all the major architectural companies. So at some point, 3D visualization came into play. Softwares that have been used to make the first games, but also videos, movies, etc. Were used, but people had to input a lot of effort, a lot of time and know-how to essentially recreate the architectural model in a professional CGI 3D software. And it was still worth it, although it was literally an incredibly tedious process where it easily could take weeks of work for a whole team of professionals in order to, result in one high quality image, for example, or maybe even a video. But due to gaming technologies and the advantages that science made in that field, in real-time graphics, in the art of actually calculating a an artificial image 60 times a second. Gaming has driven that forwards, but it came to a place where high quality graphics were possible in running smoothly on computers. You're all aware, you've all experienced that already. But still, people had to translate architectural data into game engines, essentially. And you, again, needed a lot of time and a lot of know-how for that. So Enscape's approach is to utilize that gaming technology, the ability to create stunning imagery 60 times a second, and apply that to architects' workflows. So Enscape, briefly said, is a tool for Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, and Archicad that lets you generate a high quality visualization from your CAD software data with just one click. And this click, or the button for that, is the one up here. What we're seeing right now, by the way, is not what SketchUp is going to look like after you run the installer. So let's start at the beginning. How do you get Enscape if you have not gotten to try it yet? Well, you can simply go to our website. That is enscape3d.com, and you can apply for a free 14-day trial by clicking this free trial button here. Once you do that, you will receive an installer, a regular installing, well, exe, no, actually an MSI at this point file, but that works just the same. And then you simply have to have SketchUp closed, run that file, and once you reopen SketchUp, Enscape, or no, once you reopen SketchUp, SketchUp will look like this for you minus these two toolbars. So it's going to look exactly as before, just with this extensions tab here. You can control Enscape through this extensions tab, but it is going to be a lot more convenient for you if you're using these toolbars. And you can enable these toolbars by right-clicking this area here and selecting Enscape and Enscape capturing, or you can go to View, Toolbars, and enable Enscape and Enscape capturing. So the button to start Enscape, of course, is this one here, the Start Enscape button. Yeah, almost. And if we click that, Enscape will translate all of the information from SketchUp into the Enscape engine onto the graphics card. And it does that taking all the information into account that is available. So obviously something like geometry and textures. And here we are already, and I switched to walk mode. That was not intentional. Oh, and my VR mode is enabled. So this is actually VR quality. That was not intended, but you see it already. Enscape is also VR compatible. Let's disable that so I can look up and down. So, and yeah, Enscape has generated this visualization through taking everything you can find in SketchUp. That is geometry, that is material information and textures, but also things like your shadow area in the tray, for example. From here, it takes something like time of year, time of day. So yeah, that is just the beginning. You can geolocate your model, and Enscape will adjust the sun angle correctly. You can hide layers, and those layers will then get hidden in Enscape. So essentially, you can pretty much do, you can continue working the way you're used to with SketchUp, and Enscape will simply provide a window sort of into the current state of your project in realistic high quality. So yeah, that is what Enscape is about, and that way you can use your existing workflows in SketchUp to present confidently to your client. You can adjust the project in front of their eyes. So if they want to see some adjustments being made, you can literally do that right away. If they're wearing a VR headset, you can even change things in front of their eyes while they're wearing that headset. Again, by simply using your existing architecture workflows. So that the communication between the professional artist and their client is what Enscape has set out to do, and to find the simplest and most direct way to do that. So yeah, that's how easy you can get into Enscape if you haven't done so yet. Apply for a trial, install Enscape, hit start, and you will see your project in a beautiful 3D quality right away. Let's begin with navigation, just briefly. You see most of what is, well, useful to know about navigation down here by default. You can always hide this this chart, this instruction sheet down there by pressing the H key, and you can bring it back up by pressing the H key again. Movement is WASD to move forwards, backwards, and sideways. There is two movement modes in Enscape. There is the fly mode and the walk mode. While we are in fly mode, there is no collisions, so I can move freely through anything. And I can move up and down using E and Q. Once I get out of fly mode, by pressing the space bar, I will fall straight down onto the next surface. I can no longer move up and down, and I can no longer move through anything. So collisions is applied. So if you have a door in SketchUp and you want to move through that door, you will have to switch, or you to switch to fly mode briefly by pressing the space bar, and then back to walk mode. By the way, I'm very much aware that you're probably seeing something like 2 frames per second at the moment. That is due to the service that we're using to hold these webinars. For me, of course, Enscape runs perfectly smooth, and it should do so for you just as well. Okay, so that's like the basics of navigation. If you're new to all of this, I will have a useful tip in a second. But if you want to get into WASD movement and using your mouse this way to navigate in Enscape, what I find is a good way to start with is just pressing down the W key to move forwards and the left mouse button to be then able to move the mouse to steer what direction to move into. So that way you can get a good first grip on 3D movement with WASD. If you're using something like an Xbox controller or a 3D Connection Space mouse, these tools too are being supported natively by Enscape. So you just have to plug them in, and you can control Enscape using those right away. You can also orbit around anything by pressing the right mouse button. You can change the time of day by holding Shift and the right mouse button and moving the mouse. So far it is all on that sheet. We also have a knowledge base article on movement in Enscape, and we'll be sharing that with you in a second. But in this article, you also see some more advanced ways of movement, like the numpad key or the numpad on your keyboard, which you see here. That's this block of numbers on the right side. And if you use that, you can imagine it like a sort of view cube that you might know from other software. So just to show you what it does, I'll press 4, and that shows the project from the left side. You can imagine like the 5 being your project, and the numbers around it looking towards it, sort of. So 8 will view the model from the back, 6 from the right, 2 from the front, 5 will view it top down, and 0 will return you to the view you started with. And we're going to look, or actually the scene you started with, and we'll have a look into that in a second. Just so you're relieved of this initial lots of information. If you don't want to get into movement in Enscape, you don't have to, because in Enscape, because in SketchUp, we're actually able to provide you this button here. That's the view synchronization button, which essentially means you can tell Enscape to simply move wherever you are in SketchUp at the moment. So if you just want to stick with your already established ways of navigation in SketchUp, you're good to go with it. Enscape will simply follow your movement, and you don't have to learn anything new in that direction. So once again, and you see I'm not very experienced with navigating in SketchUp. I apologize for that. Spencer, I'll get to that in a second. Very good question. So yeah, you can simply tell Enscape where to go through SketchUp. If you still want to get into navigation in Enscape and know all the ins and outs, of course, I'm happy to share our knowledge base article on this with you, named Control and Input. There we go. So Spencer has been asking, can you set up orthographic views? So if somebody's not aware of what that is, I assume probably everybody will be. There is two types of views in physics. There is perspective views, which we see on our right side here, and you of course know that from SketchUp. So you have a orthographic view here in SketchUp right now. I think, is it? No, it's not, of course not. So it is a perspective view, so you have some depth distortion here. And we can change that somehow. I know that is the case. No, it was here, right? Camera. Parallel projection, so that would be an orthographic view where it is essentially the project viewed from an infinitely far distance and zoomed back in, so whatever is farther away from the camera or closer to it, it's still displayed in the same scale. So Spencer, we're currently working on adding actual orthographic views with, I think it is currently planned for Enscape 2.7 or 2.8. I can't promise anything at this point, however. Until then, I have a neat little workaround for you, because again, as I mentioned, it is essentially just being very far away from the project and zooming back in. And we can do this with Enscape at this point. We'll just open the visual settings you find here and erase all drawings. Fly a bit away from our project. You can do that very, very conveniently by pressing Control alongside your movement button, so that way you will fly faster. And then zooming back in by pressing or by dialing down the field of view we see here in our visual settings. So this is a good way to get orthographic views. It is not 100% orthographic, of course, and I'm going to explain the reason for that in a second. But it is close enough so you probably won't see any difference. Why is this the case? Well, Enscape being a real-time rendering solution, we have to pull all sorts of tricks in the background to optimize things for them to run as smoothly as possible and with, yeah, as few calculations per millisecond as possible. So because of that, we have some values in Enscape that will notice how close is something to the camera, how far is it away, and it will spend the, accordingly to that, a certain amount of calculation or processing power on that. So an infinite far distance sort of is not possible at this point. Enscape always needs some type of information, how far is something away from the camera. But again, we're currently working on a solution for that for the future. Until then, consider using this fly out and zoom back in using the field of view slider workflow. By the way, if you want to use this to create something like floor plan renderings, well, you can of course add a section plane to your model and create that, or the floor plan rendering very easily that way. And then press 5, which I've mentioned before, which will position you exactly on top of your building. Fly a little bit outside of it with, by for example, dialing dialing the mouse wheel down, and then zoom back in by using field of view. And here's a nice little floor plan rendering for you right away in Enscape quality. What's the best practice for materials and landscape? Fabrizia, we're going to get into materials later during our webinar. I'd be happy to show you that. In terms of landscape, well, Enscape does not have a landscaping tool built in, at least not at this point. So if you want to use geometry as a landscape, you'll have to download that from the SketchUp warehouse or model it yourself. If you want to set dress that piece, you can use tools like Scatter, for example, that's being supported by Enscape. You can use skyboxes, and that is a topic on its own, actually. Erase. Skyboxes are 360-degree photographs that you can span across your scene, and you can create these fairly easily yourself. For example, with your mobile phone, with an app called Google Street View, that allows you to create 360-degree photographs of quite good quality. So that could be some sort of landscaping for you, but Enscape itself does not have a landscape tool built in. You can use skyboxes, you can use our horizon presets, which you'll find in the atmosphere tab for a quick, nice environment. Let me dial down on dial up my field of view again, and let's get back to our project. So that way you can get some nice context for your project, but for geometry, actually depicting some landscape, there is no tool for that in Enscape at this point. If you want to find it as a feature request, however, feel free to send us some feedback using this feedback button here, and we'll be happy for your feedback, and we'll forward that to our developers. There's already quite some questions coming in, and I've just lost my questions window. There it is. So let me have a look at that. I'm a landscape designer. I often share models with architects. How can share models with Enscape proxies and have them see the plans? Also, do you have any ideas on workflow with LandFX? Let's unravel that. So first of all, Jerry is writing off a very, very useful tool that I wanted to show later on, but I'll use the occasion to show it to you right away. You can export a component from SketchUp to have SketchUp perform better. So, I mean, you want to have a beautiful visualization in Enscape, a realistic and convincing one, and the core ingredient to that always is detail. So, yeah, adding a lot of detail is nice and will make Enscape look beautiful. But your SketchUp at some point will probably run a little bit slower. So to tackle that, we have introduced our Enscape proxy system. So you can essentially click any component, right-click it, and say, oh no, it's not a component yet, but let's make it one, and right-click it and say Save as External Model for Enscape. I'm currently hiding that a little bit, so let's put it here. I hope you see it. Save as external model for Enscape. And this is a great tool because essentially it will ask you to save this component as an extra SketchUp file. It will stay visible in Enscape, but it will only be depicted as a placeholder, as a box in SketchUp, making your SketchUp project, your SketchUp software run faster and more performant. Now here's the amazing catch. We have this as our separate SketchUp family right here, and Enscape will even hot load it. So that means you can have like separate teams working on different parts of your SketchUp model without interfering with each other. So that means I have, ignore that. So that means I have this shed here, or whatever, this parking whatever roof, not in this project, not here in SketchUp. I have it in a separate SketchUp instance, but I can change whatever I want about it. Let's maybe assign a new material. Let's actually show some nice. No, let's keep it simple. So let me go in there and maybe just move this a little bit. I'm really not creative right now, so maybe rotate it or whatever, just so you see some interesting changes there. All right, that's really poor example, but nonetheless, all I have to do is to hit save, and the changes will show up in my core SketchUp project again. So that is a great way to keep your projects clean and tidy, to maybe manage things like visual assets, set dressing pieces, and keep them away from your professional CAD data, and so on and so forth. So that is a very, very useful workflow, and you can incorporate that any way you want. However, it gets to a little bit of a problem whenever you want to share your project with somebody else or move your project onto a different machine, because these paths that are saved into that proxy, into that placeholder, are fixed. So what can we do? We don't have a automatic function for you at this point, Jerry. I'm afraid. I wish we had, and I'm pushing this internally. But until then, you will have to go through those link components. If you move them onto a different place, you'll have to go through that manually. Now, how can you do that quickly and easily? Well, by default, these components are automatically named component number whatever. So a good way, sorry, a good way that I found to manage these is in the default tray, enable the outliner, and here you have your component names neatly stacked. And I actually just have the Enscape objects window open at the same time and click through every one of these. I'm sorry, but that's the case. And once I hit one of the Enscape components, it will show the linked model file up here. I can click this button and relink it. So whenever you want to move your project into a different machine, somebody will have to go through that and relink those components manually up until we have an automatic solution for that. Until then, that is the workflow. Thank you for your question. Very, very good question there. Robert, my Enscape view is not showing section cut, just in SketchUp. In that case, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, let me try to reproduce that, because I think section cuts in SketchUp are section plane. That's not. Is that the correct? Yeah, all right, should suffice. So section planes or section cuts, I think, are scene based, right? Yes, they are, as we see here. So the key to that is, Robert, you have to be in the same scene that your section cut is applied to. I have no idea why. Oh no, I know why my son is disrupted like this. So let me bring it back to its natural trajectory, because I've changed that. All right, so if you switch from one scene to the other, you'll see that section cuts become active or are being deactivated. So in Enscape, you can select your scenes by clicking this button here, the Manage Views button. There's my drawing tool. The Manage Views button right here. And here you can select what scene you're currently in. And if you're in a scene that has a section, an active section plane applied, maybe this one. Well, okay. So this is scene 6 and scene 7. Let me actually see if we switch to scene 6 again. Is the section cut being applied? No, in that case not. I'm sorry. It is transitioning that from live SketchUp. Well, in that case, Robert, I'm very sorry I can't help you at this point, but please hit the feedback button and just write us the very same thing that you've just written. My Enscape view is not showing section cuts, just in SketchUp. And we'd be happy to find out, together with you, of course, what's the reason for that. I'm looking forward to hearing what might be the cause. But that's what our support team is for. We'd be happy to help you with any such, well, irregularities or questions. Are there good workflows for using V-Ray and Enscape? For example, not having to manage 2 sets of proxies. To be perfectly honest, we've never developed Enscape for V-Ray. So I know of V-Ray materials that many of them work fine in Enscape, some do not. I have not worked with V-Ray for SketchUp before, so unfortunately I can't tell you anything about their proxy system. And no, to be honest, I don't have any actual tips out of or best practices, since I personally haven't worked with V-Ray for SketchUp, at least. So sorry about that. But if you figure out, if you have an idea how we could adjust our workflows or adjust Enscape to be more comfortable for you working with V-Ray, once again, reach out to us, share your ideas with us, and we're always happy for that. All right, thank you so far. Now let's jump straight into materials if nobody is objecting, because I think that is a very important field that everybody is looking forward to. And I also want to adjust my field of view a little bit, so it's not that distorted on my half monitor here. All right, how to create nice materials in Enscape. Again, as I've mentioned before, the key to realism, to photorealism, is lights as well, as we see here, but also good-looking materials. Now, SketchUp itself comes with a very minimalistic material editor that essentially just provides you the information color or texture and opacity, and that is it. So to allow our SketchUp users to achieve the same quality of results as our Revit users were achieving back in the days when we were only supporting SketchUp and Revit, we came up with a naming system that read your material name, and if you had some keywords in it like water or ceramic or metal or something like that, Enscape would adjust your display so it looks like that material. By now we've moved past that system, so whenever you see some naming conventions about Enscape, you can still use them, but it's not necessary. We have a much more powerful material system built in that you can find right here. That's the Enscape material editor. Now, first of all, what is really cool about this material editor is it selects automatically whatever material you have selected in SketchUp at that moment. So we can just go through this with that color picker. If I manage to select a material like this, and you will see that material in the Enscape material editor right away. Now, this material editor also gives you far more functions than just color and opacity. But I still want to mention that very cool effect that if you have the word grass in your material name, it will still automatically render your material as these beautiful grass blades you see here, which also adds a lot of believability, of realism to your visualization right away. But you don't need to. You can also change any material type to, for example, grass right here in the material editor. And as you see, it's taking that color from that material as well. So you can also use it for carpets and other use cases. It's pretty much the same effect with water as well. We have moving, beautifully looking water here in Enscape. Simply apply the water material type to a material in the Enscape material editor, or include the word water or ocean or river in your material name, and Enscape will detect that automatically. Video to lag. I'm really sorry for that. Unfortunately, I cannot change anything about this. On the upper side, however, the recording you will receive tomorrow is lagging noticeably less, I hope, at least. So yeah, I hope that is at least a little bit of help for you. Hi Kai, are the changes on the materials backed up with the settings? Some parameters do not seem to register as HDRI rotations, for example. That sounds interesting, Emmanuel. I have not yet a clear idea of what you're telling me. So changes in the materials. While I'm changing here, I can only tell you that any changes to materials are synchronized to SketchUp right away. We have added some, or we have changed a little bit about our settings arrangement or our settings windows, but that didn't have anything to do with our materials, so they shouldn't be touched by that at all. And if you say some parameters do not seem to register as HDRI rotations, for example, well, with HDRI, you are referring to a skybox. Useful note on the side here, Enscape does not only use or does not only need HDRIs. It will work with any type of image file. So actually, I can just take this Enscape rendering, and no, I cannot. It has to have a certain aspect ratio. So let me just download a skybox really quickly from, for example, hdrihaven.com, a great source of free skyboxes. Let's take this wood forest here. Maybe 4K should suffice, and pull this on my desktop. And let's choose this as our skybox. I hope it went through to my desktop. No, it did not yet. So sorry for the delay. It is there. What do you want me to do? So oh yeah, there it is. All right, my bad. So we have a skybox now applied to Enscape. So we have, oh no, that's a different one, but it doesn't matter. By the way, you can control the brightness of your skybox very conveniently also down here with this slider. So and you say that rotating your skybox does not seem to work. And if that's the case, Ryan, that is the best comment I've ever had to any of my webinars. He said, I've cleaned up my desktop from the last time. Yes, I think I actually did. Thanks for bringing this up. So if you say you cannot rotate your skybox anymore, that doesn't sound good. But if you describe the problem to us via the feedback button, we'd be happy to assist you on that. But I don't know any particular reason for that at this point. I wouldn't know of a reason if you cannot move the sun anymore. That is because you've set the brightest point as sun direction, but you should always be able to rotate your skybox that you're using. So we'll be happy to help you with that. Any tips for sandblast glass? How to scale the image? Next question. Fabrizia, if you are referring to how to scale a skybox, that is a discussion I'm leading every webinar. It's not possible because you're taking the photograph of a skybox from a specific perspective, and what you're expecting when scaling a skybox, you don't just want to make it farther or nearer to you or closer to you. You want to be able to view behind things. You want to be able to see on top of that building, for example, and there is no technology, to my knowledge, at this point that is capable of doing that. So if you want to have multiple perspectives for a skybox that all fit from the scale, I can only recommend to capture multiple skyboxes from different positions wherever you're capturing that image from. Do you think water fountains, waterfalls, and also fire will animate? John, also a very good question. If you ask me if I think that would be the case, yes, I think that is going to be the case. Waterfalls or animated water is a difficult topic, though. You have to decide if you really want to physically simulate that water, or how are you using some particle systems to create the illusion, and how do you make that easily accessible for everybody, so they don't have to learn all sorts of new tools and procedures to make that look the way they expect it to. So it's going to be a very, very challenging challenge. I think we will do that at some point, but I can't tell you at this point when that's going to be the case. How can you let people walk through the animation, or cars? Wait a second, there. Or cars riding? No way at this point. We are working on some concepts in order to make some assets animated, most notably, first of all, plants, and I'm very much looking forward to that. You know, like swaying in the wind. Animating people is not possible at this point. The only thing you can animate in Enscape right now is like waves in the water, clouds, daytime, and the camera. By the way, Angelica is referring to our asset library here right now that I want to highlight briefly, that since the latest update features almost 1,200 high quality assets for you to place in your SketchUp scene. You find that that asset library right here. And of course, she's referring to our, for example, people assets, wherever there they are. And it's not going to be possible with these assets in any way, because these 3D models are photo scans and high quality 3D models, and they're not made to be animated in the first place. So for example, for an animated person, you would need to pull that hand here from their pocket, and that's not just like that possible. So first of all, we want to add some animated plants. At least that's the plans for now. There's nothing I can promise at this point. And then we will see if we can find a simple and straightforward solution to animate assets like walking down a path. Again, Enscape is always trying to keep it simple and straightforward. And we've oftentimes heard that the burden to learn a complex system like that allows you to animate certain things. We think that oftentimes simplicity and straightforwardness and ease of access is more useful and more valuable than animated people. But as always, and as I said, we gather all feedback and all requests, what you expect from Enscape, and we count them, and we develop Enscape according to that. So feel free to share that feedback with us, and we're always thankful for that. How about a ground plane horizon option? Sorry, 1 second. How about a ground plane / horizon option? So there is the giant hole beneath all projects. Melissa, so we do have a ground plane / horizon option. You find it in the Enscape settings atmosphere tab. You can choose your well, if you want to have a white ground or a black ground, or you can go for one of our skybox, or for one of our horizon presets, or for your skyboxes. If you're referring to geometry, anything that you want to walk on, anything that you want to collide with, has to be geometry in SketchUp in your project. We have been considering adding some base points or some ground models as 3D assets. But I would ask you, who was it, Melissa? Why you would need that? So is it too much? Is it too troublesome to like just place a plane to be able to walk on, or why exactly do you want a solution from us for this? Or are you imagining something like that, this horizon preset that you're seeing, that it would simply continue instead of ending in this green area? Well, we could do that, but in that case you would start seeing enormous grass blades right down there, because that's where that person took that photo from. So that would again break the illusion, because you would see like 3-meter scale grass blades below your building. So that would be simple, but it would be counterproductive. Yeah, animated doors on the horizon, Ryan. Again, we try to keep things simple. So SketchUp has no idea what's a door and what's not. SketchUp does not have a distinctive model type like Revit has, for example, for what's a door. And even then, how would you exactly tell them what angle to move along if you've modeled them yourself, for example? So at this point, we are not aware of a really workflow simple way to animate doors without you having to go through all of them and placing angles, and that comes with another rat's tail of all sorts of problems with it. So if you have an idea, you can think about it, how to really easily assign doors in SketchUp. And yeah, of course we could come with naming, but again, it's how much worth is that additional part of realism there. So far, we didn't hear a good proposal of how to solve that in a simple way that we think is simple enough to make up for, or to be worth that additional part of realism. again, we're just trying to make your work here more easily. So whatever opinion you have on this, feel welcome to share with us via the feedback button or in our forums, or schedule a screen sharing session with me or with one of my colleagues. You can do that by going to our website, enscape3d.com, and scheduling a free personal demo. It's free. You can discuss with us whatever you're interested in, and hopefully we can help you. As long as it's Enscape related, the chances are quite high. Our proxies still work when we work on other offline PC, or we just reload again with internet. If you, I think you're referring to who was it? iMade. I think you are referring to Enscape assets, right? These, if you export an exe standalone, for example, those should work perfectly fine. If you are on a machine that is never supposed to be connected to the internet, there is no asset library at this point. We're working on a possible solution for that. There have been previous versions of Enscape that came with an offline asset library, but we've put this into the cloud, so we are able to add new updates in between Enscape updates. But if you have the chance to have your computer online for at least one time, I would definitely recommend to load the asset library, maybe load the assets that you have in your project, and then you can disconnect it from the internet again. If you're referring to proxies, if you're referring to Enscape proxies, as I've explained in the beginning, you'll have to go through those proxies and relink them manually, at least at this point. If you weren't present while I explained that, just wait for the recording. You can watch it there. Yep. Unfortunately, I'm right, Ryan. I think. If not, I'd be happy to learn about that. When I make my own skybox with a 360 camera for a project, I want to fly above it and walk around it. However, when I change to fly mode, I often get a hole beneath my building. I can't seem to make a ground plane large enough to cover it and keep it in scale with my view. I have difficulties imagining that, Melissa. If you could approach us in via the feedback or via email, support@enscape3d.com, and send us an image of what exactly you're referring to, that would be very, very helpful. You have a skybox, you place your project somewhere. Oh, I think I know what you mean. You want something like, you want this ground plane to be as large, or to be so large it actually spans to the horizon. Is that possible? So you know, you'll always get closer and closer to the horizon, but eventually you will see some line there in between, and that is definitely not the way to go. Why would you want to have an infinitely large ground plane in the first place? Why not just add some walls to the end, so it's cutting off the view, for example? That would be the most simple solution that comes to my mind. But really, really large faces, objects in Enscape are a little bit problematic in any case, because Enscape is calculating the shadows for the whole scenery at once, and it takes the size of your project into account. So if we have like a 100 times 100 meters, sorry, we're European, 100 times 100 meters scene, Enscape will be able to calculate those shadows and the lighting in general with a much higher amount of detail than if you have a scene that is like 5 times 5 kilometers large or something like that. You can go even larger, that's possible, but it will you will see at some point quality problems with your shadows. So I wouldn't recommend to go that way. I know that you're probably you want to have a perfect transition between your ground plane and your skybox, I assume, but I wouldn't try to achieve that. I would rather try to have some visual barrier between the end of your ground plane and the skybox, so it looks natural. Yeah. Okay, when you have to work with a big model like a villa, that's not big. We've been working with airports and amusement parks. where you need both the interiors and the exteriors. Do you suggest to create two different models, one for the inside and one for the outside? When I have a complex model and try to render a video, Enscape often crashes. That sounds interesting, Fabrizia. I think the problem here is somewhere else. So no, I think I've never heard of anybody. And again, we've had really large projects, even to the scale that it became problematic. But for that, we have other types of solutions. So first of all, no, I don't think there is a need for that. Also, it will break your immersion, because if you have to close your video on the interior and then begin another one for the exterior, of course it's nicer to be able to fly into the building, right? So no, that's not the problem. If your graphics card crashes, it's rather because of a very long length of the video, or because you've selected a very high resolution. So a video, when you're exporting a video, it might crash due to reasons, or it's likely that your graphics card RAM is full. Your graphics card RAM is, where things are being stored that are being presented at that time in real-time 3D. So your graphics card might crash because you have tons of very high quality textures in your project. Those all lie around on that graphics card and they take up the most space. But if your video crashes, like a villa doesn't sound like a really large project where you've got gigabytes of textures in it. It sounds rather to me like you've maybe selected some very high value here in the capture tab for resolution. I would rarely go for Ultra HD, actually, because it's rarely needed. If you have some higher values, I strongly recommend you to dial down. Please try exporting your video with full HD and see if it still crashes. I think it won't. And then work your way up. It might also be the case that you have a very long video. Since Enscape is rendering videos incredibly fast, like 30 seconds easily in 3, 4, 5 minutes, we've seen some people trying to render, suddenly like 30 minutes videos or something like that. And your graphics card has to store every single frame of that in its own RAM during that creation of the video. So if you make very long videos, at some point your graphics card is going to crash because the RAM is full. So I assume the problem will be somewhere there, Fabrizia. If you have a really large project that you cannot, run fluently anymore due to your graphics card, we usually recommend to cut it in pieces using, for example, section planes. That way, whatever is not displayed in Enscape is not on the graphics card. So whatever is being hidden does not weigh your Enscape performance down at all. So if that's the problem, if you experience lagging or something, consider whether you need all parts of that model at the same time visible in Enscape. If not, just maybe export some exe files, one for each part of the model, and that way you'll get to have proper performance. Do you still have the executable outputs for our clients to see their project, for example? Are there limitations? Can they use it on their VR goggles if we create the executables for their Google vendor, Google VR, I think, or whatever? Yes, Ken, we still have exe exports. We actually have added a web export. So for everybody who's not aware of that, you can export an exe file of the whole entirety of your Enscape project. You can brand that. You can choose your own loading screen. You can put in a interface overlay. You can name it differently. You can choose your own icon, so you can make it look like it's entirely yours. It is, of course. Enscape is just the translator. Yeah, that's an exe file. It's just one file. You can run it on any machine that meets our system requirements, and you can. They don't need a license, they don't need any additional software, they just need Windows for that. So yeah, we still have those, and we have introduced a web standalone as well, which will upload our file onto our cloud you can run it right in the browser. Now for the exe files, yes, you can enable VR in those. So if they have their own VR headsets that are Enscape compatible, so it's not going to work in that case with a Google Cardboard. We have our panorama exports for that. But if they have something like an Oculus Rift, an HTC Vive, a Windows Mixed Reality headset, blah, 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 all these will work fine. They just have to enable VR in that standalone file, and they can explore the project in VR. You just have to send it to them. So yes, absolutely. How to open XML panorama files? I see. That's a very good question. I wonder how you've or how you got to doing that. I suppose I made if you create a panorama in Enscape, it's going to be saved as an XML file. Let me just demonstrate briefly. So here's how you create a panorama, and this will be stored locally. You can also choose to upload this to our cloud, view it in the web, share it with anybody via QR code, view it on Google Cardboard. But before uploading it to the web, it's just being stored on your computer. Where? Well, you'll find that under Documents. And let me just check that so I'm not sharing any important data here. So you will find this. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to have my window, my questions window placed here. So under Documents, Enscape, Panoramas. Here's all of your panoramas that are existing locally on your machine. And if you want to open a panorama from a different computer, you can simply throw it into here, make sure it's named properly, and then go to Manage Uploads, and you will find this panorama filed under its project information. All of that is stored in this XML document in this Manage Uploads window. So that way you can open it even if it's from a different computer, for example. Hope that helped. Let's see. The questioning actually started way earlier than I've anticipated. So I hope everybody has their questions answered. I hope everybody has learned something. If whatever you've expected from this webinar was not mentioned, again, feel free to schedule a web session with me or with one of my colleagues. You can hold one for your whole team if you want to. You can gather questions up front. So yeah, so whatever we can, or if we can help you this way in any way, we're happy to do so. It seems like there was a hand raised, not sure about that. Want to look into it, but I have no idea where my attendees list went again, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, our time is up anyway. So thank you very much for attending. Again, I hope you've learned something, and anyway, we can help you further on your journey on learning and experiencing your projects in Enscape. We'd be happy to do so. So don't hesitate to reach out, and see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.